Shalom, beloveds. We are speaking about the graves and talking to the dead. Yesterday I was speaking to one of my cousins. His mom is late, and we spoke something about going to the grave and speaking them. That people do testify that they came back relieved, but the scriptures forbid that. The question is, who relieved you there? Let me give you a context of scripture. During the pilgrim, when Israel would go to Jerusalem to observe the feast, the feasts were like your Feast of Tabernacles, the feasts were like the Passover feasts. Those were the feasts which were observed, so people will come into Jerusalem. Now the ministry of the priest during that time, then they will go and mark the graves on the way, because the Hebrew graves were made out of stone. You could identify one. But just in case that you can't identify it, you think it's just a stone, then they would mark it with white paint so that you don't touch the grave, because that disqualifies you from partaking in the feast. It makes you defiled. So the scriptures itself were so strict that the priests will not touch. They are not permitted to touch a grave. Being a royal priest as a Christian, in other words, it also forbids you, unless that person is related to a certain extent. But even that, there are certain regulations. As Africans, it is culture and it is tradition that people would go to speak to the graves. They would go to touch the graves anyhow. But one thing that we often miss is that nobody touches or speaks to a grave without a payment. That's why in African spirituality, they will advise you that blood has to spill, be it the blood of a chicken, of a goat, of a cow, depending on the magnitude of what you are looking for. But the fact is, blood has to be spilled. Now, when you speak to the grave and there's no spilling of blood, then your blood becomes the sacrifice. Let me give you a scenario whereby somebody goes to the grave to consult the grave, and they speak to the grave, and there's no shedding of blood, or there's no spilling blood for that consultation of the spirits in the grave. That person will be indebted to death, will be indebted to the spirits, but they do not know that they are indebted. Then the same person now has an offspring, has a child, but now here's the mystery, that child will now be born from somebody who is indebted to the grave. But because they were born in it, it becomes part of their DNA, it becomes in their blood. In other words, unlike the one who went there, this one who was born from it, it will form part of their life. No matter how much they sacrifice, the spirit will never be appeased, because it is part of their DNA. They were born in debt. They were born in Christianity. We have a debt, and that debt becomes sin. It does not matter what our forefathers did, but we were born in it. Do you understand that? Here I must give credit to the African spiritualists. They will pick it up. If you go to a consult a Sangoma, and then they will pick it that, no man, this person owes the graves. Why do you suddenly owe the graves when you have never went to a grave? Because your parents went and they never paid, they never shed blood, they never spilled blood, and you were born from that debt. And now as you are living, and even though you never consulted the grave yourself, you owe the grave. Then how do we make means? Here's the Christian view. We introduce you to Christ. We change your lineage, your ancestral line. In other words, we change you from being born into a debt. We give you a new lineage of Abraham through Christ. The covenant being the blood of Mashiach. Do you see that? That blood has been spilled for that already. Even when they do what Batwasa, they are simply making amendments or making peace and introducing you to a lineage of ancestors, that you are no longer a debtor to the grave, but in that grave you are known. In other words, the spirits of that grave, they now recognize you. You become part of them. You are no longer a debtor. But we have a better way. We have a blood that speaks volume, that is higher than any other blood, the blood of Yeshua the Messiah. Now I invite you to the family of Christ, that you may not owe any other grave, that you are not indebted to any grave. but your Adon, your Lord, is Yeshua the Messiah.